Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, today we are going to be looking at something that separates good product managers from great ones. This is actually the ability to use data effectively to make better product decisions. This is not a session about, turning you into a data scientist, for instance. It's about building the intuitions and habits that let you leverage data at every stage of the product lifecycle. So where you go from identifying what to work on to measuring whether it actually worked. So whether you're new to product management or you're an experienced product leader or even founder, the goal of this session is actually to work out for you to work out, sorry, with at least one framework or technique you can apply to your work. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So here we actually have the agenda for today, and these actually look at the practical frameworks you can apply. Um, but the first part of it, we'll start with the why. So why does data-driven product management even matter? What happens when teams rely on gut instincts alone? So we're actually going to look at that. We're also going to look at building your metrics framework. So how do you build your metrics framework? The next part of it is identifying problems with data. um, then we go on to prioritizing opportunities, measuring impacts and iterating, and we then look at key takeaways. So, why does data-driven product management even matter? So here we are moving from gut instinct to evidence-based decision making. So we'll start with the very fundamentals, and this is about why. So we can't just work with our feelings or instincts. Is it, that experienced PMs are not perfectly capable of making good decisions just by how they feel or by their instincts? So sometimes, yes, with experience, what you can actually have, identify patterns and understand the next steps to take, but most times, no. So going further, we're actually going to see the reason why it's not just good enough to rely on our gut instincts and feelings. It can actually be disastrous sometimes. So we're going further to look at why data-driven product management, sorry, even matters. So intuition, sorry, alone is not enough. So we are going to look at this stat. So research consistently shows that 70 to 80% of product features fail to move the business metrics they were intended to improve. I have used 72% here because it's actually representative of the industrial studies that go on, industry studies on it. So no matter how you look at this, it's a massive amount. 72% failure. That is a wasted effort. 72% out of 100. So imagine you have 100 products, 72 actually fail because they fail to actually understand these things. So firstly, we're going to look at the HIPPO decisions, which is the highest paid person's opinion, and we have all been here. You get where, a senior leader has a great idea and suddenly it's on the roadmap with no customer evidence behind it. So the thing is, in situations like this, data gives you the ability to push back constructively. So you're not just pushing back because you just want to argue, you're not just pushing back because you have an opinion, but data actually gives you that pedestal to actually say, yes, I'm pushing back constructively and because I am well informed to make this decision. So secondly, there's also the vanity metrics trap. So it usually feels great, when your app hits 1 million downloads or signups. I've said this repeatedly over time, vanity metrics. But if nobody opens the door after, the first step, or if nobody walks in when they open the door, then it's meaningless. All those number of people that come to knock at the door or something become very meaningless if nobody actually opens the door to step in. So it then becomes very imperative for teams to measure what matters. So what matters is very important. These are metrics that cover retention, metrics that cover engagement, and actual value delivery. We need to always have these metrics in place. So it's not just about the vanity metrics. Then thirdly, we are going to look at the slow feedback loops. So if you ship a feature and only check the numbers 3 months later, you've lost all that time. So data-driven teams build in measurements from day one. I love the quote at the bottom where it says, without data, you are just another person with an opinion. And That's true. So we need to be driven or be informed or make decisions based on data, based on what actually happens in real sense, not just based on what we feel or based on what we think or based on, feelings and gut instincts and all that. So here we are looking at the data-driven product manager's mindset. So what does it actually look like to be a data-driven product manager? So I think of it as three core qualities. First is being a curious explorer. So this means you never take a number at face value. We see this all the time where, data comes in, boom, and everyone says, oh, we have an uplift in this without drill downs. So we always need to have deep dives and drill downs in any data we have. So if retention drops, we shouldn't just say, oh, retention is down. Or if revenue goes up, we shouldn't just say, oh, revenue is up. It may just be a concentration risk. It may just be one factor, one aspect of the product that is driving revenue, whereas others are just failing. So what we need to say or ask is why. So why is retention down? And also on the positive side, why is revenue up? So you dig into segments. So segments, we have to always have we have to segment. If for an app, for example, where you have signups, you can segment by channel, you can segment by demographics, you can segment by age. So we always have to segment. You look at different cohorts, you check if something changed. And the best PMs I've worked with have this relentless curiosity. So you always have to be curious. Why did this happen? It's not just about taking things at face value. The second one is the rigorous thinker. So before you build anything, you should be able to state your hypothesis. So how do you do this? You actually say, we believe that change X will improve metrics B by so amount. So because of so reason. So it's not just, you always have to be a rigorous thinker. So yes, it starts with your belief. So you believe that if you implement this change, it will actually improve this metric by this amount based on this reason. And if you can't articulate that, then you're not ready to build yet. So the third one is being a decisive leader. So data should make you faster, not slower. Analysis paralysis is real. So the goal should never be about perfect data. You're never going to have perfect data. Rather, it should be about having enough data to make a confident call. So, and, you know, being able to communicate those trade-offs clearly to stakeholders. So it's not just about having enough data to make a confident call. You should also be confident enough, to communicate those trade-offs with your stakeholders. So at the bottom here, we say, data driven does not mean data only. So you also have to combine quantitative insights with qualitative empathy. So the best decisions actually come from this when you combine quantitative insights with qualitative empathy, because numbers tell you what is happening, but talking to users tell you why. So you can see the numbers, quantitative, oh, yes, it's rising and going up, but on the qualitative side, why is it really happening? So let's go further. So now that we understand why, we're now going to look at the how. So both of them actually go hand in gloves, why and the how. So specifically, how to choose the right metrics to track. So it's not just about having the metrics. Again, we've talked about vanity metrics, the feel good metrics and all that. But here we're also looking at what are those right metrics that we actually need to track. So this is because not all metrics actually are created equal, and tracking the wrong things is even worse than not tracking anything at all. So imagine it's just like chasing shadows. You're just, going around in circles. So you have to know what to track, the right things to track to help you out. So here we are going to look at the Pirates metrics framework, or the AARRR. I actually call it AARR. So which this was actually devised by Dave McClure. So the pirate thing, is actually intentional. So it's not like some Pirates of the Caribbean stunts going on here. So, but I'll walk you through each stage. So these actually look at the 5 stages, that businesses actually need to look at, products need to look at, businesses need to look at, sorry, for their products. And it covers areas like acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referrals. So the first one is acquisition. Acquisition asks, how do users find us in the first place? So It's about, how do these people find us? And you can do it, this can be through search engine optimization visits, it can be through ad click-through rates, it can be through referral sign-ups. How do users find us? So the key metrics for this one are, things like cost per acquisition and channel conversion rates. So we need to look at, things like the cost per acquisition, sorry, and channel conversion rates. Then the next one is the activation. So, and this answers the question, do they have a great experience? So it's not just about getting people. Again, as I said, it's not just about having people knock on the door. Your door can be beautiful, but what is behind that door? So when people knock on that door, do they have a great first experience to say, oh, I'm comfortable enough, I'm loving this experience, let me get in? So it's, you have that eureka moment, that aha moment where you say, oh yes, we have them, you get, but we need to make it more impactful. And the key metrics here include onboarding completion rates, time to success, time to value. So remember, time to success is different, time to value is different. You need to define what is time to success. Is it from the moment where the customer gets opens the app or something, and closes the app, ends up applying for whatever he's applying for and closing the app? Or is it from the point where the customer opens the app and gets value? So let's use mortgage for an example. For instance, so where you have a mortgage app, for instance, you open the app, is time to success or time to value when you've applied, or is it when you've actually received mortgage, the money you need for the house and all that? So that's also a very critical element to define. So the next one is retention. And this is actually big. So, and this answers the question, do they come back? So it's not just about acquisition and activation. You also need to keep them back. That's the key thing. So if you're not retaining users, nothing else actually matters. If you actually acquire people, you activate them, and they leave, then nothing matters. And the key metrics here are the D7 and the D30 retention. This actually looks at percentage of users who return after day 7 and day 30. You get, and you also have the DAU divided by the MAU ratio, which measures the percentage of monthly active users who engage with products daily. So, oh, sorry, yeah. So you then have the revenue side of it. So revenue asks, do they pay? And, of course, you're running this because it's a business. You're running it because you want to be profitable. You're running it probably because you have stakeholders you have to pay at the end of the financial year. So profitability, revenue is very important. So do they pay? So a lot of founders love this part. I love it too. I love, money makes the world go round, they say. So, and it's asked, do they eventually pay or even pay more? Yeah. So key metrics here include, the average revenue per user, that's the ARPU. You also have the conversion rate, and then you have the lifetime value, which looks at the total revenue a business can expect from a customer throughout their entire relationship with them. So the last part of it is referral. So this answers the question, do they tell others? Do they love it enough to tell others? You get, and on this part, you have the Net Promoter Score, NPS, which, actually looks at things like how likely are you to recommend and all that. You also have customer satisfaction, CSAT, and you have viral coefficients, which actually measures the number of new users an existing user generates. And then you have the invite rates, which, and all these things actually tell you about organic growth, because it's actually surveys that get sent to users, and they rate, they have open and closed-ended questions where they rate their experience. So the real power of this framework is that, it helps you find your biggest leak. So if 10,000 people visit, but only 100 sign up, then it's easy to know that you have an acquisition to activation problem. So, and on the other hand, if 5,000 people sign up, but only 200 come back after a week, then that means retention. It may be pointing at retention. So we are here this helps us to actually focus on where the leak is the biggest. So, and that's where we actually get the most leverage. So here we are looking at the North Star metric. So while AA, triple R, or AARR actually gives us the full funnel, we also need a single guiding metric, which is the North Star. So the North Star is the one number that best captures the core value of your that your product delivers. So for Spotify, for instance, for Spotify, we all know Spotify. It might be, how much time do people spend listening? So this can actually be that for them. For Airbnb, it can be how many nights or days have been booked. For Slack, it could be, how many people actually send messages via the channels. So it should have three properties, and these properties should reflect value delivered to the customer. So it's a leading indicator of revenue, and it's something teams can influence. So on the other side, North Star alone is also not enough. So we need input metrics, and these input metrics are actually the levers that drive them. You see, and I've split this in four categories. On one hand, you have the breadth. So how many people are engaging? So this measures your reach. We also have depth. How deeply are they engaging? It's not just about how many people are engaging, but how deeply are they engaging? So more sessions should actually mean more features used. So if someone is spending more time on your app, it should also mean they're exploring, a lot of features. So frequency is the next one, which looks at how often do they come back? Is it daily, or is it monthly, or is it weekly, or is it yearly? How often do these people come back? Then efficiency, how quickly do they get value? So if your time to value is too long, you lose people before they experience the benefit. So the beauty of this model, which is the North Star, is that, when your North Star dips, you can immediately look at the four input metrics to diagnose why. So when it dips, you can look, is it a breadth issue? Is it a depth issue? Is it a frequency issue? Is it an efficiency issue? So is it because fewer people are using the product, or the same number of people are using the product but less deeply? So these actually point you to where to navigate, where to look at, and all that. Yeah. So the next one here is, an additional distinction, before we move on. And this is where we have the differences between leading indicators, or I call them lead indicators, and then lagging indicators. I don't call them lag indicators though, but leading indicators or lead indicators for me, and lagging indicators. So leading indicators predict future outcomes and are actionable in the short term. So things like feature adoption rate, onboarding completion percentage, and support ticket volume trends. So if your onboarding completion drops this week, that's an early warning that retention will suffer next month. So you don't really need to wait for the end of the month or something. If the onboarding completion is lower this week, then it should actually signal that we might have problem with retention next month. So lagging indicators, on the other hand, confirm past performance but are harder to influence directly. So this looks at things like revenue, churn rate, and net promoter score (NPS). So by the time your churn rate spikes, the damage is already done, and it suggests that those users have already left. So we are going to look at it this way. When you're driving a car, you have your windscreen, and you also have your rear view mirror. So leading indicators are actually, what you see ahead of you, in front of you as you're driving, and the rear view mirror is actually the lagging indicators, because you've already seen, what you've passed. So I don't know if it makes sense, but because you're seeing ahead of you from the windscreen, but when you look at the rearview mirror, you're actually seeing what you've already passed. So both are actually very important, and they tell you, what's coming, where to turn. That's for the leading indicator. For the lagging indicator, confirm where you've been. You get. So you want to steer using leading indicators and validate using lagging indicators. So you steer using leading indicators when okay, why is feature adoption rate high or low? Your lagging indicators will actually, point you to that. NPS, churn rate, and all of that will actually point you to that. So track leading indicators to steer, use lagging indicators to validate direction. So here we're going to look at how we can identify problems with data. So how do we identify problems with data? So this is where we have that detective sort of work coming in. And I would say it's our time to wear that Sherlock Holmes hat and get to work, because this asks, it actually looks at how we can actually identify problems with data. We'll be talking about problems, we'll be talking about, frameworks and all that, but how exactly can we even identify this with data? Sorry, yeah, okay. So before we dig into the technique, so we're going to map out where data actually comes from. And I think of it in four buckets. So these four buckets, we have the top left quadrant, we have the top right, bottom left, bottom right. And I'll start with the top left, which is product analytics. So product analytics, here we have tools like Amplitude, Mixpanel, and PostHog. And these tools actually give us quantitative behavioral data. It looks at, funnels, cohorts, user paths, and feature usage. So this is your what is happening data. So this data actually looks at what exactly is happening. So qualitative, on the other hand, is more around research, qualitative research. So here you have user interviews, surveys, tools and techniques like user interview surveys, session recordings, using tools like Hotjar or Full Story. And this is your, why is it happening? So remember, product analytics is, what is happening, and this one talks about why is it actually happening. So, and we never really underestimate the power of watching five users struggle with the same flow. So here, MPS verbatims are actually, the customer comments. So when you have those open-ended customer comments asking, okay, how can we improve our services? So those customer comments. But when you're also doing this, ensure that PIIs, that's personally identifiable information, are tokenized. You get things like name, social security number, home address, telephone number, things like that, especially when you're actually looking at data privacy concerns and all that, data security and all that. So always make sure that the PIIs are tokenized. So on the bottom quadrant, the bottom left, we have business intelligence. And here, we look at our Looker dashboards, Metabase, or direct SQL queries. So this looks at revenue trends, cohorts lifetime value analysis, segment analysis, or breakdowns, and this connects product behavior to business outcomes. So on the bottom part, we have the customer feedback. And here we look at, our support tickets, feature requests in tools like Canny or Product Board, and also our customer satisfaction, CSAT or NPS verbatims also come in here. So, and this is an unsolicited signal from your users telling you what's broken or missing. So when you send out those surveys after every experience, it can be TMPS, it can be BMPS, it can be CSAT, you also need to understand what's broken or missing. And even in these CSAT feedback analysis, you also need to segment. You can also segment by channel. You can also segment by age, because the thing is, as I've said over the time, when this feedback comes in, you also need to know, okay, out of these people, who are actually using these things more, who are actually responding to these surveys more and all that. And that will actually tell you if it's more of a pain to them or if it's a general pain to others. So if you weight them based on these channels too, or based on these age bands, or based on, demographics or something, it can also help you even narrow it down further to solving problems for the actual people. So the key insight is that no single source tells the full story, and the best PMs triangulate. So that is, they see a drop in a funnel metric, which is the analytics part of it, and watch session recordings of where users get stuck, which is the qualitative part of it, and check whether it's affecting revenue, which is the business intelligence part of it, and see if support tickets, are spiking around that feature, which is the customer feedback side of it. So triangulation is what gives you conviction that you've found a real problem worth solving. So here we are looking at the funnel analysis, and we are going to find the drop-off point. So I'll walk you through what we have here. So here we can actually notice that on the landing page, we start with 100 people. Then sign up starts. When it's time to sign up, it drops to 62 people. So this, is actually a big drop. But then let's even go further. Then from 62 people who signed up, 48 people verified their emails. So we're actually losing some steam here. So, but well, 100 to 62 to 48, it's still not really alarming, although we've lost a lot of steam. But then from 48%, we get to 29%. So 29% actually completed their onboarding, conducted their onboarding. So this is actually a 40% drop when you look at it from 48% to 20. So it's a 40% drop. And on just this single step, you get. So this means that, from this graph too, we can also see that only 18 met the first value. So the biggest single leak in this funnel is actually this onboarding step, you see. So here we have a drop of 40% between these two, which is the onboarding funnel. So as a PM, this is where, we should focus our investigation. And our investigation should be, we should ask these four questions. There could be more questions to ask, but based on this, I'm just highlighting these four questions. So, and oh, sorry. And the four questions should be, where do they abandon? So, where do these people abandon? Which step takes too long? Are expectations misaligned? And is there a confusing UI pattern? So, these questions are very important. So, it looks at, where is it that they, so if the abandonment is from a step two, you know, or step five or something, if you actually notice where it is, then you know where to specifically look at. You get, then which step takes too long? So if one step takes 8 minutes and users bail after 3 minutes, then you've actually found your culprit. So if it's just that it takes too long because nobody wants to stay on a phone for, filling a lot of things or something, they get bored. You get, and again, we also need to factor in that actual users of products are everyday people who are stuck in traffic all day long, who work two, three jobs, who also have, some personal problems and all that. So the next one, which steps takes too long? So, sorry, our expectations misaligned. So, maybe users signed up expecting one thing, but then they're seeing another thing. So we also need to align the expectations. So if you're going to say, when you click on this, you're getting to the final stage or something, or you're going to submit, if you click on a submit button, then let it be that they are submitting, not coming up to show something else. Yeah. So is there a confusing UI pattern? So sometimes it's as simple as a button that's hard to find or a form field that is unclear. So it's not a Easter eggs or something you get. Or you can't design your UI based on Easter egg or talent hunt or something. It has to be very clear. So if you're clicking that this button will take you to the next page, if you're going to show that this button will take you to the next page, let next be clear enough, let back also be clear enough, and let it not be something that people will have to rack their heads around to figure out. So here we are looking at segmentation and cohort analysis. And I live by this rule, average actually lies. So, which is why we always have to segment our data. So when you look at an average, it looks good. You look at the average, oh, everything is fine. But when you segment, when you have deep dives, when you drill down, you actually see that, oh, some are doing way better than others. And because you're looking at an average sort of thing, those ones that are doing way better will actually cover up for the ones that are not, take the heat for the ones that are not doing very well. And as such, it looks good on the surface, but when you drill down, you would see that there are areas that are doing very wrong. And I'll show you what I mean. So this chart here, we have the gray line and we have the blue line. So this looks at users who signed up from week 1 to week 6. So, and we have the January cohort, which is the gray line, and we also have the February cohort or new onboarding, which is the blue line. So this is actually a real scenario, and it's not just, an example. So we can see that in January, by week 6, only 25% of the people who signed up from 100, we now had 25%, only 25%, sorry, the January one is the gray one, and only 25% went from 100, and only 25% were retained by week 6. So it means that only 25% were active, and it's not a great sign. So, but on the other line, the February cohort, actually had some improvements. So it went from 100 that signed up by week 1 to about 40% by week 6. So when you look at it like this, yeah, you can say, well, 25 to, but it's actually a big leap. It's a 60% relative improvement when you compare or juxtapose the 2 months in question. So you have a 60% leap, which is actually a reason for us to celebrate. It shows that we had done something better. So if we only looked at the overall average retention across all users, that's if you just look at overall, then this improvement would have been diluted. I might have missed it entirely. Exactly. But the cohort view makes the impact unmistakable. So this kind of analysis actually tells us the new onboarding genuinely works. Yes, the new onboarding system genuinely works. And we can see it in every week of the retention curve. We can see the big improvements in January when we had the old onboarding system, and in February when we had the new one implemented. So, secondly, the steepest drop is always from week 1 to week 2. So that tells us where to focus next. So what happens in those first 7 days? This is where the D7 thing comes in, that causes people to leave. Then third, we should always segment further. So break it down by acquisition channel, mobile, face-to-face, telephony, online, etc. If you use a branch, okay, branch is also face-to-face, you get. So do organic users, sorry, retain better than paid users. So we also, break it down by geography too. So what areas, what locations, what places are we actually seeing, these big changes and all that. So you can also break it down by device, by plan type. Is it, when you have tiering and all that. So what tier actually has this big drop? You see, so every segmentation reveals something new, and you always have to segment by your offerings and all that. So fourth, we need to compare power users to casual users. So what behaviors do our retained users exhibit that churned users don't? And this tells us exactly what to encourage in onboarding. So the combination of funnel analysis and cohort segmentation is incredibly powerful. So the funnel tells us where the users get stuck. Cohorts tell us whether our fixes actually work over time. So here we are looking at prioritizing opportunities, and we are using frameworks to make confident bets with limited resources. So here we've actually identified the problems and opportunities using data, but how do we now even prioritize those opportunities? So let's dive right into it. So here we are looking at the impact versus effort metric. This is also a 4-quadrant metric: top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and we are going to walk through all this. So this is one of the simplest and most useful prioritization tools, and it's a 2 by 2 grid. Again, 2 up, 2 bottom, that plots every opportunity by its expected impact and effort required. So the quick wins, for instance, it's actually high impact. The quick win, sorry, top right, is actually high impact and low effort. So these are your gold, you get, and we do them first because they build momentum. So credibility with stakeholders are also built with, having the quick wins first. These are the easy, quick things you can just do and, have things running. Then, and also it unlocks, sometimes, most times it unlocks, further improvements. Then an example can be fixing a broken call to action button. So, which is, if there's a call to action button which is killing conversion, which is affecting a lot of things, or adding a missing error message that confuses users, let's say you click on cancel, you get, and it doesn't really tell you, that canceling means you will start afresh or something, you get. So these are actually quick wins that can fix a lot of things. So the next one is the strategic bets, which is in the top left quadrant. So, and these are your big features, your platform changes, your major bets. And yes, while you should pursue these things, you should follow up with them, but we need to plan carefully. So we need to use experiments and prototypes to de-risk before committing full engineering resources. Then we have feelings at the bottom right corner, and these are fine to batch together during quieter periods, or allowing the junior product managers or delivery team, sorry, look into it. So we don't really need to spend planning cycles on them. So then we have the avoid. So these, as it says here, these are the high cost, low return, and we need to say no to them because this is where teams waste the most time. So it's actually what I call the danger zone, and they are the pet projects, the nice to haves. When you have Moscow, must have, should have, could have, would have, they are like the nice to haves. That's, well, yeah, it's good, it's fancy to just have it. So our job as the product manager in this instance for their voice is actually to say no. We need to have the ability to say no, but most effectively is the ability to communicate these trade-offs in a very good way, because we also need to manage the stakeholder relationships. So we also have the pro tips to the right here, where we always have to score impact using data. So this can be revenue uplift, retention improvement, or user research. So impact should not be subjective. It should actually be backed with data. So the next one is we always have to estimate effort with engineering. So we never have to guess alone. So if you guess alone, then you're likely going to underestimate. So engineering has to be there in whatever estimation you're doing, because they're actually the ones building. So they need to be there in your estimation. So reevaluate quarterly. This is because market conditions change. And last quarter's avoid, like what you might have as last quarter's avoid, might be, the next quarter's quick win. So saying, this is a nice to have now does not mean it to be a nice to have forever. You get? So a nice to have today can be a quick win tomorrow. Then finally, we need to present trade-offs, not just recommendations. So we need to show stakeholders, what you need to give up to do their pet project. So that transparency actually builds trust. So when stakeholders are pushing, no, we want this, you actually need to present these trade-offs clearly. You need to tell them, if you focus on this, these are the things we might be losing. These are the benefits that we might be missing out on. So, you know, this is right scoring framework, and it comes up when you need something more rigorous than a 2 by 2 grid. You get? So, and this was actually developed at Intercom, and it gives us a quantitative score for every initiative. So rice, not the food, but it's reach, impact, confidence, effort. So reach, for instance, now, so reach looks at how many users or customers this will affect in a given time period. So we need to be specific. So a lot of people, or many people, or a large number of people, no matter how you want to put it, is not specific. You get? It's actually not a number. But when you come out to say 15,000 users per quarter, based on our current analysis or something, or current traffic or current data, that's a good point. That's a good starting point to start with in reach. So impact, this looks at how much it will move our target metric. So Intercom uses a scale. That's the people who developed this RISE framework. They use a scale, where 3 is a massive impact, 2 is a high impact, 1 is medium impact, 0.5 is low impact, 0.25 on the other hand is minimal impact. So this forces us to be honest about whether something is truly transformative or just incremental. The next one on the list is confidence. So this is actually the secret weapon of RISE. It forces us to honestly assess how much evidence we have. So 100% means we have solid data that could be in the form of user research, A/B test results, or strong analytics. 80% means we have some confidence. 50% means, it's mostly a hunch. Low confidence doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But, however, it means we should just run a prototype or experiment first to raise that confidence before committing full resources. So the last one is effort. So effort looks at the person months of work across all teams involved. So these teams include, design, engineering, quality assurance, testing, QA, and in fact, everyone in the delivery team, business analysts, all of them, product manager, product owners. It actually looks at, the person months in doing it. So a quick example is this. So if we have a reach of, 8,000 new users per quarter, and we say, okay, the impact is 2, which is high, and the confidence is 80%. So based on this formula here, which is reach times impact times confidence, that would be 8,000 reach times 2 confidence, sorry, then times 80%, which is 0.88 confidence, all divided by, and we have an effort of 1.5% month, sorry, all divided by 1.5. So that means the number we get, from my calculation is 8,533. So when we do this, we'll then have to compare, this with another initiative, and the relative priority becomes clearer. So the beauty of RISE, as much as I want it to be the food. But the beauty of rice is that it depersonalizes the debate. So it doesn't make it about, the person, or it doesn't make it about any other thing. It's strictly, you know, realism based, I would say. It's actually about data. It's strictly backed by data. So what is the reach, what is the impact, and what level of confidence do we have for this, divided by what level of effort or person months do we think this will take. So it is no longer about, I think this is more important. It's no longer about, oh, this guy doesn't always like taking my jobs and all that. It's actually what the data says this scores higher. You see, so when the data says this scores higher, or that scores lower, then that's where we should focus our priorities on. So here we are looking at measuring impact and iterating. So how do we measure impact and iterate? So closing the loop. So did what we shipped actually work? So we've talked about finding problems and prioritizing solutions. Now we'll go into the final phase, which is, how do we know if what we shipped actually worked? So here we have the A/B testing, the gold standard. So A/B testing is actually the gold standard for measuring causal impact. So it's not correlation, but causation. What caused it, you see? So, and we have a 5-step process for A/B testing. So the step one here is hypothesis. So we need to start with a clear statement. We believe that, again, I say what I said earlier on, we believe that changing X will improve so metric by so amount because of so reason. So we need to write this down before any code or hard codes are done. You get? So step two is the design. So we need to define our control and variant. So calculate our minimum sample size. We can use an online calculator if needed, as simple as that, and set our test duration. So decide statistical significance upfront. So typically 95%. So the third one, is run. So here we, split traffic randomly and equally, monitor our guardrail metrics. So guardrail metrics are actually things that we don't want to break, just like guardrails. Yeah, so you don't want to break them. So these are like, your error rates, page load time, or other key metrics. So the fourth step is analyze. So wait for the full sample size before concluding. Segment the results. That is, where you look at the new versus returning users, mobile versus desktop, or different geographies. Then the fifth one here is decide. So based on results, it's either we ship the winner, iterate if results are promising but not conclusive, or kill the variant if it's underperformed entirely. We kill it entirely. So now at the bottom here, we're actually looking at the common pitfalls, to avoid in A/B testing. So sometimes we are tempted. Sometimes we want to, check results daily, quickly. Yeah, let's see what's happening. Some even do okay, check in the morning, check in the evening. You get before, and make calls before we have statistical significance. So what you see these daily or hourly or something checks, you might just be making calls, blank calls, even without having enough statistical significance. So early results are widely unreliable, and we need to resist that urge. The next one is ignoring segments. Again, talk we can't keep talking about the importance of ignoring segments. So our overall result might be flat, but that could be hiding a win for one user segment and a loss for another segment. So we always have to segment. So imagine where we do an average sort of thing. An average will hide a lot of things. So many times we see it, in government reports, for instance, where they say, oh, this is the average you get. We always need to have deep dives. We always need to drill down to see, okay, what segments are actually driving this and what segments are underperforming. That way we know what to focus on. Then testing too many variables. So if you change the button color, the copy, and the layout simultaneously, you have no idea which change drove the results. Exactly. So we always need to isolate one variable per test. So it's not just about, you're changing everything at the same time. That way you don't even know what brought about the change or what brought about, further reductions. But when you, isolate these variables for every, test, then you can actually pinpoint to say, okay, it's actually this color that we changed that brought this sort of change. So not everything needs an A/B test actually. For small changes or when traffic is low, qualitative methods, qualitative. Remember, qualitative actually tells you, what the people feel about what drove it. So qualitative methods, actually work. So for big bets, A/B tests gives you the confidence that your change actually costs the improvement. So um, yeah. So here we are looking at the post-launch review, closing the loop. So I feel strongly about this one, and because every launch deserves a structured post-launch review. So most teams ship and move on, but the best teams measure, learn, and share. So I recommend this timeline. On day one, we need to monitor. So our job is to make sure nothing is broken. That means we need to watch error rates, we need to watch the performance metrics, critical flows, user flows, and we also need to check if our guardrail metrics are stable. So this is not the time for celebration, it's actually the time for vigilance. So monitoring keeps us vigilant. Week one, we need to validate. So we need to check early adoption signals. What percentage of eligible users are using the new feature? So are they using it the way you expected? Is support ticket volume spiking? So this gives you an early read on whether the launch is going smoothly. Then week four, on the other hand, we need to measure. So this is our proper evaluation point. How does the feature perform against our predefined success criteria? So here we need to run a full cohort analysis comparing pre-launch versus post-launch users. And if we run an A/B test, this is when we should have enough data for a confident read. Then week eight or more, or week eight and over, here we learn. So we need to write a one-pager summarizing what worked, what didn't, and what we'll do differently. So share it widely, not just with our teams, but across the product organization. So this institutional learning is incredibly valuable. So on the right side here, we have success criteria template. So before you launch anything, you should have documented the following. So you should have your target metric and threshold documented, guardrail metrics, minimum sample size, evaluation timeline, decision framework. So the question here is, what will you do if the results are positive, inconclusive, or negative? So this template forces clarity upfront and prevents future rationalization. And it is one of the highest leverage habits you can build as a product manager. So I also have this last slide here, which are the key takeaways. So number one here is start with a metric framework. You need to know your North Star metric and the input levels that drive it. Without this, you're measuring activity, not progress. So we need to start with a metric framework, know our North Star and the input levels that drive them. So number two, segment everything. Again, we can't overemphasize that. Segment everything. Overall averages are deceptive. Always break data down by cohort, user type, channel, or geography, device, anything based on your offering, tiering, plans, break it down. So the insights live in the segments. So deep dive, always have a deep dive. So number three, use RISE or a similar scoring framework to prioritize objectively. So reduce bias and make trade-offs explicitly. So it also gives you a common language for stakeholder discussion, of course. So again, remember, RISE removes personalization. It removes, everything about RISE is backed by, real hardcore evidence based on analysis. So define success criteria before you build. Number four, if you can't measure it, you can't learn from it. So this is the habit that separates good PMs from great PMs. And if you can't articulate what success looks like, you always need to define what success looks like. Then, and it's not just by defining it, there must be a specific metric you get and threshold for what success looks like. So remember, having a lot of people is also not, you need to define it by specific metrics. So, and if you don't have these things in place, then you're not ready to commit engineering resources. Then number five, close the loop. Every single launch deserves a post-mortem. So the learning you generate is as valuable as the feature itself. and sharing that learning across the organization compounds over time. So if you do nothing else after this session, I would actually encourage you to pick one of these five and implement it this coming week or the next month. Implement it in what you do. Start small, build the habit, and expand from there. So when you actually have these things in place, take it forward, apply them to what you do this coming week or this coming month in products and all that. And I believe you would see changes coming in. So I've also left a note. Thank you, by the way, for your time and for, keying in. So, and what you need to remember is that data informs decision, and it does not make decisions. It does not make them for you. So the best PMs blend data fluency with customer empathy and strategic vision. So you don't need to implement everything we discussed today. You just need to pick one thing, one framework, one technique, one habit, and start there. Build the muscle over time. So I really appreciate. Thank you. Thank you very much.